and I want to welcome you guys to the ArtPlay Jouer Collection. Jouer is the French verb for to play. And I think I'm just going to show you here the collection because I feel like it's a bigger screen, but this is the complete collection. We have the template, so we have the collection, the actual ArtPlay palette, and then to coordinate with that, we have the word art, and then the template. I love the texture in this particular collection. And it has that kind of, it's a primary sort of palette, but it also has that red, white, and blue that's coming out. So I feel like it would be a really good palette for Independence Day and all the patriotic pages for those of us with flags with the red, white, and blue. And then we have the photo blends, which are really cool because they have some of the paper textures in there as well as the art strokes. And then the paint texture as well. I tried to bring that into those as well. Some really fun frames. It's always fun to play with different shapes. So I had a couple of neat ideas of things that we could do with those. And then the add-on collection, of course, the bonus that you get when you buy the complete collection, which of course is all of you guys here today. And so thank you for your support. And then the companion sets. So we have the ArtsyTransfers, which of course are the layered versions of the transfers and overlays in the ArtPlay palettes. But I will say that they do differ. And the transfers and the overlays in the ArtPlay palettes do complement the transfers in here. So if I've included something in the ArtPlay palette, it's unlikely that I will re-include it in this collection of ArtsyTransfers. And then these were a request from one of my team friends. And so those are some fun little textures to add to your pages. I want to work with those today. I have a really cool idea that I got from Jerry, another one of my team members. I want to play with this this technique that she used in her layout design. We've got the Artsy cards, which go really well with the photo inspired pages or templates. And then these were also another request from Michelle from my team. And I tried to include a variety of things here. So there's a train, a tractor. We've got a fun old fashioned VW camper, some off-roading kind of like a Jeep thing. And then we've got a taxi and a racing car and then some trucks. So lots of different ways you could use those different vehicles. And let's go ahead and just take a look at some of these things. So I like to give you kind of a peek inside the collection. So what I do is I do this video in two parts where I post the first part on YouTube so that people who are interested in the collection but not sure, they get to kind of have a peek inside the product. So I want to do that first. And then we'll go into creating the 3 layouts, which of course my participants here today, they're the most interested in that because they've already seen the collection. And then I also have the team layouts. So every week I kind of add more and more. I try to stick to 10, but sometimes it's hard. So I might just whistle through these a little quicker than perhaps usual, just because there are so many. So of course we have the ArtPlay palette. And I have also, I'm kind of hit and miss with this. Sometimes I like to keep the Artsy cards and the ArtsyTransfers with the ArtPlay palette. Sometimes they're out here with these other guys. So it really just depends on how I'm feeling on the day. I tend to kind of move these things around, but it is nice to have the Artsy cards and the ArtsyTransfers with the ArtPlay palette. So that's often how I will keep those. And so with these, we get the papers, of course, which are really the foundation of the ArtPlay palette. They're the first thing that I start with, and it really does dictate how I am going to or how the ArtPlay palette comes together. So how these 4 papers come together. And I'll tell you that they take usually about 2 days to create. So maybe a day and a half. It really just depends on how the creativity is flowing. But this one here is kind of fun. I had this idea that perhaps this would be a really cool landscape. I like this slightly diagonal line with the idea of maybe the sun, and these could be waves. I don't know, I had this idea of an extraction of a little child sort of walking along here, or a boat or a car kind of coming along here. And then this one wasn't intentional, but it kind of looks like a horse to me, or a moose. So any of you guys with sort of photos of animals and stuff, I don't know, that is how it came out. And I wondered about taking that off, because I thought, well, maybe it's just too theme specific. But by the time you've placed a photo lens or a frame over the top of it, you really can't tell it's a horse. So I really like the design. So that kind of stayed in. This one is probably my favorite one. This is the one that became the Artsy template. And I really like the X on this. I'm really into X's and O's at the moment. So you'll see those quite a bit coming into my work. I don't know what, my husband hates them. I've got a painting upstairs with an X and an O on, and he's like, can't you paint over that bit? And I'm like, no, I like that. And then this one came together pretty quickly, but I like the paper textures in these, and just generally the paint textures in general. And then of course you have your 5 papers. This one's pretty neat. It is in PNG format instead of JPEG format. So let me just show you. If I go ahead and bring in, which one do I want to go with? I'm going to go and bring in this solid paper here. And then if I bring in the other paper, this one, I'll show you the edges. So as I add it onto my design, and then I go to layer style and drop shadow, you can see the edges are slightly not the best drop shadow. So let's go ahead and just modify that just a little bit, just to make it a little bit more realistic. So you can see how this, you know, could be used like this in your design, but it has this really sort of fun edge. You could also resize it and bring it in so that it has more of a framed, trying to rotate this. There we go. So it has a framed look to it, and then you could create your composite on there. So that's pretty neat, that little paper edge there, something a bit new that I don't always add into the mix. And then we have the brush set. Of course, this one actually has 18 brushes in. I couldn't leave any of them out, and I didn't want to add them to the bonus. So you get 2 extra brushes in this particular collection. And I always try to create a variety of edges, a variety of blending brushes, and brushes that you can kind of clip images to. There's always some paper textures in the mix. I like to have, of course, it's not working now, paper textures into the mix. I like to have some paint strokes. That's a good blending brush. Here we go, some art strokes here, and some art strokes and some edges. I love the edge across the top here. So lots of fun different brushes. This is a good edge as well. I like a kind of variety where you have a mix of texture and line and shape. And of course, you've heard me talk about these a lot, but just go ahead and pick up your design principles and element properties if you have forgotten what those mean. But I really like this brush set mainly because of the really cool textures that are involved with that. And then, of course, we have the elements. I had quite a number of requests for play themed, for grandchildren style elements. And so I wanted to kind of create a variety of those. We've got a toy car, we've got a lollipop in here. Of course, the ones that are in PSD format, they are designed to be opened into your workspace. And then if you look at them in your layers panel and you select those 2 layers, and then with the move tool, drag them onto your layout design, you can see that that drop shadow is independent from the actual lollipop or the element itself. And then this allows you to adjust the opacity of that drop shadow. You can increase the drop shadow. You can change the blending mode as you prefer. So it just gives you sort of flexibility to do that. If you're not working in Photoshop, of course, you just select those 2 layers and you drag them into your workspace. And then you have to just reorder the layers, but you can see how those have now been placed into position. So that's kind of how those work. And then if you are using the other elements in the elements sort of category here, which don't have the drop shadow layer style attached, then you can just drag it in and you go to layer style, and then drop shadow. And then that's going to apply your drop shadow. And I like to have sometimes off black. So in this case, because the tones in my layout here are browns, then it makes more sense for me to go with browns. And then you can play with the distance to get the best fit. You don't want to have a drop shadow that's all the way out here, because then it looks like it's floating. You want to have just enough dimension that it looks like the element is sort of laying on your canvas. So that's how you create a drop shadow layer style. I like to have my angle at 120, and I like to have my blend mode at linear burn, but you could also choose normal, you could choose multiply, really whatever you prefer. So that is the first part of the ArtPlay palette. I always split them into two because some people are still living in the middle of nowhere and have slow internet speeds. So I try to keep the file sizes to about 100 megabytes, and then that makes them easy to download. So we have the transfers and overlays, and these are, I alluded to earlier, these are solid kind of, or PNG files. So they are on transparent backgrounds. So if I go ahead and select a couple of these and drag them into my workspace, and because these are single layer PNG files, I can just drag them directly onto my canvas. But you can see the transparency of those layers, and then you can kind of place them as you wish on your layout design. And so these differ from the ArtsyTransfers in the fact that these are single layer designs. In the same sort of scenario, we have a variety. We've got this fun little overlay here, sort of art strokes filled in a little bit. This is white, so this is a splatter. If I go ahead and drag this in, you can see that a little bit better. We also have some fun transfers that have been taken from the paper designs. We've got some paper areas. So again, lots of different varieties so that you can sort of drag those onto your design. So that's the ArtPlay palette. And then we have the ArtsyTransfers. So just as a comparison here, if I go ahead and I bring in this element here, you can see that this ArtsyTransfer has lots and lots of different layers. So let's go ahead and just delete these layers and drag this onto here. So you would select all the layers in the layers panel, click on the top layer, hold down the shift button on your keyboard and click on the last layer. And then with that move tool selected, you're going to drag that over. And this is really fun because then it allows you to turn off different layers. And so you can also change the color of different layers if you want to. You can move them around. So say, for example, you don't like this sort of horse design that I have going on here, then you can mix that up by starting to move these different elements around. You can turn off the visibility of layers. You can also change the color of them. So maybe I want to bring this down here, but maybe I want to have it that brown. So in that case, I could go to hue and saturation, and I could start sort of making my own designs by moving these images around. And if you have this auto select option checked while the move tool is selected, then you can sort of pick up some of these different elements and just start playing with them that way. You can apply blending modes, you can do all sorts of fun things. Whereas with the transfer, if I go back just briefly to the transfer of that option and just drag that in, this one has a few more details to it, but you can see that that is just one single layer. And so it's easy to sort of move around and kind of work with, but it doesn't have the flexibility of all the different layers. So that is the difference between a transfer, an Artsy transfer and a ArtPlay palette transfer. So let's move on quickly. We do have the Artsy cards here. These are delivered in both JPEG format, and then again, in the same way as the transfers are delivered in PSD format. These are also the same. You can see all the different layers here. So they're kind of fun because you can go in and you can work with the layers individually. You can clip your photos to different layers, which is also a fun way. And then you can also frame them using the different frames. Maybe we'll go that route today as we get into our layout designs. So that is the ArtPlay palette, the Artsy cards, and the ArtsyTransfers. I also have the Artsy layer template, which if you've been in these sessions before, you know that I like to start with this just because it kind of gets me warmed up and it's an easy way to create a layout design. I like to create these photo blends clipping masks. They're delivered in both PNG, layered PNG, and then the PSD format. So again, the same sort of situation here. We have multiple layers. And so this provides flexibility with being able to clip your photos to the different layers or recolor them. And the same sort of situation, if you're not working in Adobe Photoshop or Elements, then you would use these layers and you would literally just drag them into your workspace, and they're going to place hopefully in the way that they should. And so you get the same sort of ability to be able to use that layered format. And I have done these in a way that if you wanted to, you can use the crop tool, the selection tool. So if you wanted to have them like this and you wanted to separate these layers, then you could use either the lasso tool or maybe one of these selection tools. I tend to favor the polygonal lasso tool. I'm sure you have a selection tool in your program of choice. And this allows you to select that layer. And then you're going to go to edit, cut, edit, paste, and it's going to pop that onto a second layer so that you can recolor and resize and rotate that and just manipulate it independently from these other layers. So I'm careful about which layers I combine together so that you can easily separate them if you need to. And so, of course, these photo blends, they coordinate with the Artsy papers. And then they also coordinate with the multimedia frames, which are super fun. So lots of fun little elements in here, some baby clothes, there's a chocolate milk bottle top. I love these little tire streaks that are in the bottom down here. There's a vintage car if you like to do heritage layouts. So I really kind of tried to think about the different types of layouts that you could work with. I also really like this palette because not only is it related, baby related, but I feel like it has a good vintage component to it. So you can bring in some of that modern sort of meets vintage sort of vibe into your old layouts as well. But then it has that sort of fun modernism of the round frames and the oval frames. And so I think it's really helpful for that. And again, these are delivered in PSD format, and then the layered elements are available for you if you need them. If I was working in Photoshop or Elements, I probably would be inclined to delete all of these layers because you really don't need them. I put them in there for those of you guys that are working in different programs outside of Photoshop and Elements. And then I think that pretty much covers, we have the word art, and I'm not seeing it. Oh, here we go. Here's the word art. So the word art is really fun too. You can really see how that works based on the preview. Lots of different variety. My favorite way to build a title is to use 3 or 4 different types of word art and sort of unify them together. So you get this one beaded threads, which is really fun because it comes in PSD format. So you can actually open this up, and if I wanted to customize this, again, any PSD file you should open into the background. But one of my favorite things to do with this is, and of course, as you collect more of these collections, then you get more of the letters, but you can actually turn off some of these layers. So I could put pay in here, and I can move these letters around and have pay instead of play. So Kim loves that name. I can see her cheering in the background there. So yeah, so she could totally customize that for her namesake, for example. And then there are the fun little titles here. These are really easy. You just drag and drop them onto your layout design. Again, if you wanted to use that lasso tool or that selection tool, then you could go ahead and you could kind of extract those out and make your own kind of words and fit them together. I love these word strips. They're really good for filling in white space. And then I'm a big fan also of these word transfers. It's where you see them all the time. These also come in brush format. Anything that's black in here, just black, that comes in this brush format. So you can use them with brushes. I'll try and remember to load the brushes file today so that we can use them that way. And then I really like the wood words too. I thought that the wood went really well with this vintage style palette. So that is the actual collection. And then with the collection, of course, you get the bonus, which is super fun. We have a fun little element here. So if you've got any ballet dancers or little girls in your life, then a fun little dancer in there. And if you don't, then you can just turn off these layers and just use the button and the string, and maybe import the toy car from the ArtPlay palette. So that would be a way that you could customize that to make it work for you. I did a bunch of different layout designs here so that you can have some ideas of how these products go together. We have, of course, the live inspiration access after this session. This will be replaced with a private link that you will have access to watch the replay whenever you work with this ArtPlay palette collection. And then I really like this ArtPlay palette paper too, or this Artsy paper. I like this little paint area. It kind of looks like a heart. And any of you guys who have been in my sessions enough know that I love circles and I love hearts. So you will see those a lot. And if you don't like that sort of thing, hearts, if you've got boys and hearts don't work for you, I certainly don't mind using them with my boys. But if you have a thing against them, just place a transfer over the top of them so that you don't have to see them. And then a little bit of extra word art to throw into the mix as well. So really fun little bonus collection there. And then on top of the Artsy cards and the Artsy transfers, we also have the automobiles in large format. So when I have these two different brushes, large format is for those of you working in newer versions of Photoshop and Elements, which have brush capacity up to 5,000 pixels. If you're working in Photoshop Elements 15 or below, then you can only use brushes up to 2,500 pixels. And I've got you covered with a special little brush file here that you can use instead. So if if you want the large brushes, use the large brush file. And then the same thing with the paper textures too. I have to resize some of these. I try to make the images as large as possible, but if you are working in an older version of Photoshop or Elements, you can use the larger file. You just simply use the overlay version instead of the brush file, if that makes sense. But if you want to use them with the brush tool, then you're going to have to load the smaller style brush file. Okay, so that is the actual collection. Let's now take a look at the layout. So my fantastic team have created some really fun pages. I think I'm just going to whistle through them and sort of just talk about the things I like about them. This one is from Michelle. I love how she has coordinated the colors of the elements with the kids' clothing. And I really like her use of the paper texture to sort of contain the edges of her blended photos. This is a fun little way to use the labeled word down here too with the buttons. So she's got the little labeled word is what I call them. She's added a drop shadow, and then she's added this heart button down the bottom here to draw the eye and to kind of bring the viewer's eye to that word. And then notice all the different splatters going in all the different directions, which add visual interest to the image. Another one from Michelle, two of her grandkids, similar sort of thing. I love how she's customized that threads with the little ballerina. She's added in some of the elements from the ArtPlay palette. She's added in that beaded threads from the word art, and she's made this fun little title cluster. She's also modified the color of the background too. Notice it has more orangey hues as opposed to the bright red. This one is from Adrienne. Love her sort of, I love how this area here has sort of, it comes up like a flower. It's almost like Thumbelina, I think, with the little guy blended into the middle here, and then how that bonus threads sort of leads the eye over to her journaling. And I actually, when I did this journaling, I thought about Adrienne, and I was like, I know she's going to love this to my children, and she used it. So it's really fun when you think about your team I was going to say team players, but you know, your creative team. I mean, they are team players, but when I'm creating, I think about people. You know, this is what's so great about these sessions is I get to know you, and I get to know you, what you're scrapbooking. And so I think about you when I'm creating, and I'm like, oh, Kim would love this because she likes to do travel pages for her daughter. And, you know, so it's really nice to have that idea of who you're creating for. In this case, I thought about Adrienne's heritage pages and how she would enjoy that word art. This one, I forget, this one is from Laura. And I like how she's used the pinwheels. You'll notice how she has resized them, 3 different sizes, and she's created a visual triangle which leads the eye around her design. And these are in a contrasting color. They do bring out some of the teal that's in the background here, but they're in a contrasting color. So it really sort of draws the eye in. And there's something about the spinning of the pinwheel. It has your eye sort of turning in a circle as well. So I like the use there. This one is from Kathy. I love how she always seems to be able to, now she says this is jouer, but I'm not sure if this is jouer at all. Now looking at it, it looks like what if the garden veranda, I think it is. So I'm just going to skip past this one, even though it says jouer. Deanne's done some really great double page spreads with this collection. I love how she's recolored. So her photos are obviously yellow, green, and neutral colors, and you can see how she's changed the color of the artistry in the background to support those hues. And then notice too, I love the use of this. I love these word strips. I think that they're a really fun way to lead the eye. There's something about the very largeness and the horizontal nature of those lines that sort of is very impactful, I think, in these designs. And in this one, I like this one too, because she has recolored a lot of those elements. And so just to know you have that option, you can take those elements and recolor them to coordinate with your photos. And this one's super classy too. Notice how she's recolored this truck down here to coordinate with her images. I like the white space as well. It really allows the design to breathe. And I love how she's used the paper textures and the elements to create a foundation for her landscape. I think if it were me, I would have built that up a little bit so that these lines sort of would continue on. So maybe build up the landscape at the top here and maybe to the side. If that had been me now looking at it. This one is really fun of Mikey. She's used a dog, and I love the extraction. Of course, it looks like this little, I don't know if it's a boy or a girl, but looks like the dog is sort of bursting out the frame. And this is really fun too, how the teddy bear is upside down. It's like being tossed to the ground. So just another fun way to think about using elements is to rotate them and use them upside down. From Heather, again, I love the alignment of this cluster here, very classy, but she has aligned this car and recolored it to coordinate with the car here. And she's aligned it with this edge of the pinwheel. And then, of course, we've got the very horizontal nature, which works with the horizontal lines running through her focal photo. And then, of course, you have the vertical lines too. So you have these vertical lines, and then you have the diagonal lines. So all of these different lines that come through create visual interest, and then they stand in contrast to the curves in the Artsy paper that's sort of showing through the image. And again, recolored this to support the colors in her photos. This one is from Joan, as she's taken her photo and she's blended it. And I like how she's placed the artistry around her photo. Notice how that sort of contains the image. And so the side of the photo blends is of similar color. I suppose you've got similar sort of hues, this light pink and oranges and browns. And then where the green would sort of flow into the pink, it wouldn't be such an easy transition. And so she's placed these elements around that to make it work. And I like this one. I love the artsy side. It was what attracted me to this digital scrapbooking in the first place. And it works really well with these painted textures when you apply a color burn or similar sort of blending mode to your photo. And it creates this really cool artsy effect and allows that paper texture to show through the image. This is the image that Jerry created, which I think is quite special. And I really love how she's lined up the paper textures with the textures on the photo. So I kind of wanted to play with that concept a little bit in the next portion of this video. Also like how she has recolored the elements to support her design. Notice the visual triangle here. I suppose this could be a visual triangle too, so you could have multiple visual triangles, but this works really well. And I like the diagonal here, which it kind of creates a cross with the diagonal of the bird. So that creates tension in the design as well. Another one from Michelle, great clusters going on here. I like how she has sort of brought the pink in and allowed that red to transition into these various shades of pink. This one is from Mikey, another baby layout, really cool. I love these circle frames. I think they work really well. This one is really neat because it pulls in one of these older dotted borders. And I like how she's tucked the little frame into the bottom here with the labeled word. So it's really fun when you have a focal point, but then you have these fun bits of artistry on the edges. And this, of course, creates a nice visual triangle. This one is from Joan. I like her use of the textures here. I like just how she's sort of lined them up and they just add visual interest to the actual overall design. And then she's overlaid her photo over the top and done some extraction work on that. And then she's created a visual triangle with the yellow. This one is from Alame, and again, using those fun circles. I like this idea, and I was wondering about maybe playing with this, where you sort of use the frames first, and then you build the design around the frames. And then this one was cool too, by Mikey. I like how she has used either an overlay or brushes to embellish that pinwheel. So you could kind of clip those brushes, or you could clip a document with, in this case, it looks like perhaps a math book or a textbook on showing you how to complete this Rubik's Cube. But you could take the actual scan of the page and you could place it over the top of the element and apply a blending mode in order to be able to knock out the white background and allow the words to show through the element. This was a fun one using the brushes. I like how the Jeep here is kind of coming out of all of the words, and I like the paint in the background. And I also like how she's desaturated the artistry in the background to draw the eye to the blue in her images. And so this, I feel, is a good focal point. You've got this as a focal point, and then this, which creates a nice visual triangle. And then this one I created for the AA Connect last week. This is another heritage page, getting slowly inching closer to finishing that. But just, I thought that this palette goes particularly well with the heritage vibe. And then this one from Nancy, lovely 3 little clusters here to create a fun visual triangle. Clusters don't have to be complicated. They just could be 3 different elements placed together to kind of increase the visual weight. And I like how she's used this circle stitched frame, and notice how the tread of the tires and then the paper texture and the stitched frame, they all sort of create, they all have this same alignment to create the circular motion around her visual triangle as well. And I think that is it. So that kind of gives you an idea of the collection. It gives you some ideas on how to create with the collection pieces. If you are interested in this collection and you don't have it, you can go ahead and go to my blog at AnnaAspnesDesigns.com and go to Jouer, and then you can click on any of these links down here, which will take you to the complete collection, or you can click on the separate images to access those products individually. And then once this video is all kind of complete, I'll update this post with the replay of this part of the class. And then, of course, the next part where we're going to create the 3 different layouts, those are going to go into your private little collection where you can access them at any time when you open up this. The idea of this is not just to give you inspiration now, but maybe a year or 2 from now, you go revisit this collection and you kind of forget how to use it, and you can go back in there and access that link in the bonus if you keep the bonus with your collection. And then you can go ahead and just remind yourself of some of the different ways to use these pieces.